The photo that you were just looking at was it's a photo of a group of sanitation workers down in Memphis, Tennessee, back in the civil rights movement. It was shot in 1968 by a guy by the name of Ernest Withers. And if you've never heard that name before, if you Google it, you'll find a pretty interesting story about him. Ernest Withers was a photographer from the civil rights movement, and because he was well known, he was allowed to be to get behind the scenes of certain meetings, meetups with prominent figures from the civil rights movement. And so because of that, he actually became an informant of the FBI. And so there's a whole story about him. But one of his most famous photos he's taken was this picture from Memphis, as I mentioned, and the sanitation workers who were fighting for equality, right, in the workplace, equal pay, equal treatment, all the stuff that came with the civil rights movement. And, you know, just to see someone holding a sign that says, "I am a man," it's heavy, heavy shit, right? I mean, you shouldn't have to tell someone that you're a man, that you're a human being. Like it should just be understood. And it's not too different from what we see today with people holding signs up that say Black Lives Matter, right? I mean, it's essentially the same message. This is just saying, hey, I'm a man, and then the new one's saying like, and our lives matter. You know, it's almost the same, it's almost like two sides of the same string here. And so I was staring at this photo today, and I've had it on my wall for years. I went to the Human and Civil Rights Museum back in Atlanta, Georgia, back in like 2012, maybe 2013, something like that. And I've had this photo ever since, which, by the way, if you've ever had a chance or you ever have a chance, you should absolutely go to this museum. It is beyond powerful. It's in Centennial Park in Atlanta, and civil rights movement is a majority of it. Then there's a human rights portion that's equally as powerful. So if you ever have a chance, I highly suggest you go. But I went again. I've been twice now, and I went again just in January of 2020. Actually, I had some work out there, and I went to the museum on an extra day I had. And so I'm staring at this photo today, and you know, the sign's reading, "I am a man, I'm a man," all these guys holding the sign. And in the middle of the photo, there's one set of writing that's a little bit faded out. And it's almost like in my mind's eye, I saw the "a man" portion fade out completely. And I just read "I am." And instantly in that moment, I started thinking of the magnitude of that statement right there, the statement of "I am," right? Just period. And obviously you know that at the time, unfortunately, to say "I am a man" was necessary. To stand up and say, "Hey, I am a man" was a necessary thing that they had to do. It's a step they had to take. Just like, unfortunately, now we have to say Black Lives Matter, right? Like, you shouldn't have to say these things, but you do. And so when I noticed that just "I am," it got my mind thinking, and it's like, you know, if these are the same message that we've been talking about, like, why isn't it that's gotten any better? You know, and we always talk about how to fight systemic racism and these options of like educating people and awareness, and all that stuff is necessary. But if we really look at where hate comes from and what hate is, we find that hate is a product of the mind. And so instantly, if you know something is derived from the mind, then the answer is, how do you transcend the mind, right? You can't get rid of the mind, you can't destroy it. And if you want to get on a deeper sense, you know, there's an ego factor into it, right? Like, the ego is designed to protect us, and fear is one of the ways it helps us out, right? If we're walking along a cliff, we have this fear of falling off, and it keeps us alert of the edge of the cliff. So the ego within us and the mind work together to protect us. And one of those ways is fear, right? And hate is fear-based. And so you see this connection already between the two. And so, like I said, the question becomes, if we know it's from the mind and the ego, And we can't destroy the mind or the ego unless you're an enlightened being who who transcends the ego. The real secret is to get past the mind, to transcend the mind. And so I'm thinking about this as I'm reading just this sign, and all of a sudden they turned in my face, like in my mind, I could literally see all the amen portions go away. And I just said, I am, I am, I am. And I just, like, the answer became clear to me. It's I am. It's getting in touch with the eternal self that we truly are. And so what do I mean by that? We put ourselves in boundaries. A perfect example is growing up, I was raised by Filipinos. I'm black and I'm white. And genetically, I am 56% white. I'm 56% Irish. I got my genetics tested. But in my mind, I always derive my sense of self from my African American side. So I dressed a certain way, I spoke a certain way, I acted a certain way. I mimicked things that I felt lined up with who I thought I was. And so what that tells us is that we get to choose who we are. We get to choose where we derive our sense of self from. And if we keep using myself as an example, because I chose to be African American and in the black culture, it put myself instantly within a certain boundary or box. There were certain things that I didn't want to identify with anymore, and there are certain things that I felt stronger identification with. And so you see that when we place ourselves within these boundaries, within these bubbles or these boxes in our own minds through our identification, we close ourselves off to limitless other possibilities. I mean, even the simple fact of referring to yourself as a man or a woman limits you, right? I mean, we've come from the blend of a man and a woman. So energetically speaking, there's a masculine and a feminine energy that come together that form us. And obviously, if you're manifested as a man in this life, then the masculine is the more dominant energy within you. And if you're a female, the feminine is the more dominant energy within you. But did you not come from a masculine and feminine combination? So would they not both be present within you? And so when we find ourselves identifying with male, female, black, white, rich, poor, we're placing boundaries upon ourselves. And so I'm sitting here staring at this photo that I've had in my house for years, and I'm seeing the sign turn to I am, and I realize that how you beat separatism and racism and hate and all this stuff is by simply removing the boundaries. Why set ourselves in a boundary? Why say I am a man? Why say I am a woman? I am a black man? Why not just say I am? Why not derive your sense of self from just I am? But what does that mean, right? Like, okay, cool, let's say it, but what does it really mean? In the yogic science, there's this term called the self, okay? And what the self is, that sounds kind of funny. The self is it's the eternal soul that lies within your body, that lies within your being. The self is the same soul energy that's in a dog and a cat and a tree, in your neighbors and your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your moms, your dad, and yourself. It's the exact same energy. It's the exact same life form that resides within all of us. Another way to see it from an analogy is if you have the sun and the sun is shining its rays of light down, imagine yourself as one of these individual rays of light. Okay, you're this individual ray of light, and there across from you is another individual ray of light. You see yourself as separate, but you both come from the same exact source. And so the self is the eternal one life that resides behind form, right? So behind all the countless various types of form, from a fish, a cow, a horse, a person, a black man, a white man, whatever, there's the soul self. And actually, yogic sciences has a complete process literally written out already that explains how to identify yourself more with this soul self. And there is also a very easy technique that I've learned that works pretty well. You essentially you close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and just center yourself and focus on your breathing. And whether you're standing, sitting, or lying down, you can sense with your eyes closed whatever you're sitting on, whatever you're lying on. Just sense that feeling, that pressure against your body, that there's something under you, right? Once you've identified with that, you're going to have some kind of labels. You're going to call it a pressure, a feeling, a sensation, whatever. Just drop the labels and just feel it. Sit there for a moment and then ask yourself, or I could even, if you're doing it now, I'd ask you a question. How do you know that you have hands? With your eyes closed, how do you know you have hands? And simply feel. Is there a tingling? Is there a numbing sensation? Is there something that you can label with your mind there that tells you you have hands when your eyes are closed? And then once you've identified with that, once you've put a label, a mental label on whatever that feeling is, let's say it's a tingling, remove the mental label, remove the word tingling from your mind, that mental label that's there, and simply feel. And what you'll find by doing that is that you're identifying with the soul self. You're transcending the mind and you're identifying with your eternal self. And in this identification, there's this stillness that will come across you, this peacefulness that comes across you. And there's tons and techniques that you can take and do to identify with this soul self, both through meditation and through your daily life. And the more you do it, the more you start to find this stillness and this peacefulness in your life. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced, and I've found myself addicted to it now. And I have people ask me all the time, like, why do you seem so calm, so chill? And my answer is because I derive my sense of self from my soul self and no longer the world of form, right? Because this world of form we live in is subject to the laws of polarities: good, bad, hot, cold, white, black, rich, poor, masculine, feminine. It has to be that way, or else we wouldn't have this world. But just because the world is that way doesn't mean that we need to be that way ourselves. We have a choice. Just like I had a choice on how I wanted to identify when I was young. I chose African American. We all have a choice on where we want to identify. And so when we talk about how do we stop racism, yes, it's going to come with education, and yes, we have to work on equality and all these things. But the truest answer is that it starts within. And it starts by identifying with the one thing that we have all in common. The single one thing that's in common with all of us is the soul self. And an intellectual understanding of that is fine, but it takes an experiential understanding for it to really take foot. So when I look at this photo, I understand why we have to hold a sign saying, I am a man. I understand why we have to hold a sign saying, Black Lives Matter. But I just wonder what kind of world it would be if we were holding signs that said, I am. Signs that say life matters. If we truly were believing and fighting for those rights or those standards, how different would the world be? And it would be interesting to see where racism goes, Even if you took away someone's sight, there would still be hate. If you took away someone's smell, there would still be hate. Someone's touch, someone's hearing, sound. You can keep taking all the senses away and hate would still exist, because it's not about the 5 sensory organs. It's a product of the mind. It's part of the ego's way of protecting us. And the only true way to get past that is to transcend it. And transcendence comes with deriving your sense of self from that within, and not from the world of form, which is ever changing. So I just want to share that. I had that insight today, and I thought it'd be something I should share. Happy Black Excellence Month to everybody.